I think we need to start today by talking about list. You know the one I mean?
Oh, I do.
It's almost, it feels like it's ingrained in us from every movie or TV show where a character loses someone.
Mm.
It's that mental checklist. You start at shock, you move through anger, tick the box for depression, and then, if you do it right, you finally get to acceptance.
That's the famous 5 stages.
Yeah.
It's, I would argue, probably the most pervasive psychological model in Western pop culture. You see it everywhere.
It is everywhere. And it makes grief seem like this straight line. Like if you just keep walking, the storm clears and you're done. You've graduated.
Right.
But I was reading the source material for today, this article, Grief Comes in Waves, Navigating Memory's Tides by Oliver Remington. And honestly, I just felt this huge wave of relief. Because the reality, and I think anyone listening who's been through it knows this, it almost never feels like a straight line. It feels like a glitch.
Right.
Or like static.
It feels like absolute chaos, and that relief you're talking about, that is exactly what we're digging into today. The mission for this deep dive is pretty specific. We're not just here to say, grief is hard. We know that. We are looking at the neuroscience, the psychology behind why it feels the way it does.
Why the surges? Why the blanks?
Exactly. Why do we have these sudden surges? Why do we sometimes just go blank?
Yeah.
Remington's work argues that understanding the mechanics of the brain can actually help us survive it.
Yeah, shifting from asking what's wrong with me to how does this actually work? And that word Remington used, glitches, that really stuck with me.
It's a great word for it. We're going to look at why the brain actually processes loss in these loops and skips rather than that neat straight line.
Right.
And the most important thing, I think, that the source argues is that this isn't you doing it wrong. It's your brain working exactly as it's designed to. It's about adaptation, not just sadness.
I love that distinction because for so long I looked at that 5 stages, model, denial, anger, all of it, and I thought, okay, well, I felt acceptance on Tuesday, but now it's Thursday and I'm furious, so I must have backslid. I'm feeling at grief.
That is such a common feeling. But it's based on a complete misunderstanding of what those stages were even for.
Really?
Yeah, Remington makes a point to correct this early on. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages, they were originally observed in patients who were terminally ill.
Oh.
They were mapping the experience of dying, not necessarily the experience of someone who's surviving a loss.
Wow, that is a huge distinction that just gets completely lost. So we've taken a map for one territory and tried to force it onto another one entirely.
Precisely. And that's why it fails. Because grief isn't linear. The source material actually calls the reality of it the mess. And neurologically speaking, that's a much more accurate term.
The mess doesn't sound very clinical, but it feels very accurate.
It is, because emotions arrive completely out of order. They repeat, they overlap.
Yeah.
Remington gives this example that I think is so relatable. You feel a genuine sense of peace one day. Maybe you're having coffee, the sun is out, you feel okay. And then you wake up the very next morning just engulfed in red-hot anger.
And your first instinct is to think, oh, no, I lost all my progress.
But Remington's point is no. That's not what's happening. That nonlinear path isn't a failure to move on. It's just the brain's natural way of adapting to a massive change in your reality.
Computing power required for that.
Exactly. Think about it. Your brain has to recalibrate a world that used to have this central person in it, and now it doesn't. That is a complex calculation. It's going to take more than a straight line to solve.
So if it's not a line, the metaphor the article uses is waves. But what I found so fascinating was the reason why it comes in waves. It's not just poetic, is it? There's a biological reason.
This is where we get into what the article calls the circuit breaker theory. And this, for me, this really shifted my whole perspective.
Okay.
Think about your house. If you plug a hairdryer, a microwave, and a space heater into the same outlet, what happens?
The fuse blows, the lights go out.
The circuit breaker trips, it cuts the power. And why? To prevent a fire, to stop the wiring from melting. Remington argues that the human brain does essentially the same thing with grief.
So the pain of the loss is the electrical overload.
Exactly. The brain simply cannot handle constant, high-intensity, 100% volume pain every single second of the day. Physiologically, it would be a total system failure.
You couldn't function.
You couldn't. Your cortisol would be spiking, heart rate through the roof. You'd burn out. So the wave is a survival mechanism. The brain doles out the pain in manageable bursts.
That is, wow. Okay, let's unpack that, because that completely reframes the good days. When you have a day where you aren't crying, maybe you're not even thinking about the loss constantly, guilt can creep in. You think, am I forgetting them? Do I not care enough?
But what this theory suggests is that your brain is just recharging. It's a mandatory rest period,
The calm period.
a calm period,
Oh,
to rebuild strength, to let
Yeah.
your system come back online, and then inevitably the swell comes back.
Triggered by something specific, usually a scent, a song.
Yes. And when that trigger hits, the circuit connects again and you feel the full weight of it. But the key insight here, the thing to hold on to, is that this ebb and flow is what allows a person to keep living.
To go to work, to eat.
To eat, to sleep, exactly.
Yeah.
If the wave never receded, we drown. So the wave isn't punishment, it's protection.
That's a huge shifting perspective. It makes grief less of an enemy attacking you and more of a biological process trying to keep you safe.
Right.
But there's another side to this protection that the article gets into. And honestly, this is the part that I think scares people the most. It's the glitches we mentioned earlier.
The memory glitches. Yeah, this is a very sensitive area.
It is. I've heard so many people talk about this. You panic because you try to picture your loved one's face or hear their voice in your head, and
Yeah.
you get nothing. Just a blank, a fog.
It's terrifying. Remington calls it a foggy blank.
Yeah.
And the immediate emotional reaction is, I'm losing them again. First they died, and now my memory of them is dying.
Which just feels like a second death. It compounds everything.
It does. But again, the source material offers a neurological explanation that is incredibly reassuring. This is a stress response, plain and simple.
Okay.
Grief places a massive cognitive load on the brain. We're under immense stress. And we know that stress directly impacts the hippocampus. That's the part of the brain for memory storage and retrieval.
So it's not that the file has been deleted.
Not at all.
Mm.
Think of it like a search engine when your Wi-Fi is down. You can type in the search terms, but you get 0 results. The data is still out there on the server, but the retrieval mechanism is offline.
So the file is there, but the filing system is just jammed.
That's a great analogy. The recall falters because the system is under pressure. The memory isn't gone. The pathway to it is just under construction.
Under construction. I like that. Remington frames it as rewiring our inner world around their absence.
And that takes a lot of energy. The brain is basically updating its entire operating system to version 2.0, the version without that person physically present. But here's the good news from the article. The memories return. They flood back. Once that acute stress subsides, or when the neural pathways reconnect, they often come back unbidden and in vivid detail.
Unbidden is the key word there, right? You can't force it. I've tried that. Squeezing your eyes shut, trying to force a memory, never works.
It never works, and trying to force it just adds more stress, which actually makes the fog thicker.
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. You stress about forgetting, which creates more cortisol, which blocks retrieval even further. But then you'll be doing something totally unrelated, and suddenly there they are, crystal clear.
Which leads us perfectly into the next part, the ambush of the ordinary.
Mm.
Because those unbidden moments, they don't usually happen when you're standing at a gravesite or expecting it.
No. They happen when you're doing the laundry or waiting for a bus.
The laundry example in the article was just so poignant. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. Remington describes this scenario. Someone is just folding clothes. It's a mundane Tuesday. They aren't thinking about loss. And they pick up a shirt that was forgotten at the bottom of the basket. And suddenly, wham!
The ambush.
A rush of laughter and tears. It's a sensory trigger. The article calls these triggers in plain sight.
That's so true. We brace ourselves for the funeral, for the first Christmas, the birthday.
We put on our psychological armor for those days. We know the blow is coming.
But you don't have your shields up for finding a left-behind sock or seeing their favorite cereal in the grocery store.
And because your guard is down, those moments can just knock the wind out of you.
They really can.
But Remington suggests a reframing here that I found really beautiful. Instead of fighting these moments or seeing them as interruptions, view them as portals to the past.
Portals. That sounds nice, but isn't that just putting a positive spin on pain?
I think it's more functional than that. It's about recognizing what the moment is. These triggers are proof that memory isn't static. It's not a dusty book on a shelf. It is alive. It's woven into your daily routines. The source suggests these surprises are like gentle bridges to the love that remains. It's the brain's way of integrating the person into your present, not just your past.
That concept of integration that feels so important because our culture always tells us to move on.
Right.
And moving on implies leaving something behind. But this suggests we aren't leaving them behind. We're carrying them differently. We're weaving them into the laundry.
Exactly. We are integrating, not deleting.
Okay, so we've established the waves are normal, the glitches are temporary, the ambushes are bridges, but we still have to navigate this. What does the source material say about actual tools?
Remington moves into what he calls new horizons. And it's interesting because it blends very old concepts with very modern tech. The first thing is what he calls digital anchors.
Yeah, this was interesting. We live in a digital age, so our grief is digital too.
Right. The article mentions a platform called a life portrait, but the broader concept is about moving from static memorials to dynamic ones. A tombstone is stone. Name, two dates. It's quiet.
It doesn't tell you what their laugh sounded like.
Exactly. The source talks about these living tributes, digital spaces where you can store photos, stories, voice notes, a multimedia archive.
And how does that help with the waves? Is it just about preservation?
It's about resource management.
Yeah,
Think about the glitch we discussed. You're panicking because you can't remember their voice.
right.
If you have a digital anchor, a steady space you can visit on your own terms, you can go there and just hit play. It turns that scary glitch into a moment of connection.
It's like an external hard drive for your heart. When your internal recall is failing from the stress, you have a backup.
That is a perfect way to put it. An external hard drive for the heart. You visit it when the wave hits. It gives you something to do with that energy instead of just spiraling.
It feels active, like you're doing something with the grief instead of just suffering from it.
And that leads into the other tools. The article mentions journaling, but with a twist. Not just I'm sad, but specifically mapping your triggers.
Mapping the landscape.
Right. If you know that Sunday mornings are a trigger, or a certain route to work sets off a wave, you can prepare. There are even apps now that track emotional patterns to help you see that, hey, maybe the waves are getting slightly further apart.
The article also mentioned EMDR. I've heard of that for trauma, but not really for grief.
It's becoming much more common. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The source mentions it as a way to smooth out those memory glitches.
How does that actually work?
Well, in simple terms, it uses bilateral stimulation like moving your eyes back and forth while you recall a distressing memory. It helps the brain process stuck memories so they don't feel like a current threat anymore.
It takes the sharp edges off.
It takes the sharp edges off so you can remember without that immediate circuit breaker crash.
It's really treating grief as a physical event in the brain. And then, of course, there's mindfulness.
Which brings us right back to the wave metaphor. You can't stop the wave, so you have to learn to surf, or at least float.
Floating feels much more attainable than surfing sometimes.
Floating is probably the better goal. It's not about emptying your mind. It's about recognizing, okay, here comes a wave. I feel intense sadness. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to let it wash over me, knowing it will recede.
It really all comes back to acceptance, doesn't it? But not the checklist kind. More like acceptance of the mess itself.
Exactly. Acceptance of the chaos.
So what are the big takeaways for someone who might be in the middle of a storm right now?
I think there are three main ones from this piece. First, embrace the chaos. That nonlinear grief is normal. You're not failing.
Okay.
Second, triggers are teachers. Those moments aren't setbacks. They are revealing layers of love.
And the third?
Patience. Just grant yourself grace during the glitches. Your brain is doing heavy lifting. It's rewiring your entire reality. That takes time.
We started this by tearing down a checklist, but in a way we've built a new one. A list of permissions.
Permission to be messy.
Permission to forget temporarily. Permission to use technology to remember.
Permission to be messy is something I think we all need to hear. We hold ourselves to such high standards even when we are suffering.
Absolutely. Well, this has been quite a journey through this article. It's amazing how resilient the biology of the brain really is.
It is. It's built to survive this.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We talked a lot about the fog, that scary feeling of forgetting.
Right, the brain protecting itself.
You usually have the final thought on these deep dives. What's the one idea sticking with you from this?
You know, I keep going back to that circuit breaker concept. We treat the fog of grief, the numbness, the blank spots, as an obstacle, something blocking us from our loved one.
Yeah.
But if we really trust the neuroscience Remington presents, if the brain forces us to forget temporarily just so we can survive the sheer magnitude of the pain, then maybe we shouldn't resent the fog.
So how should we see it?
Maybe we should see it as a biological act of mercy. It's your mind's way of keeping you safe. It's holding back the full weight of the memory until you are strong enough to carry it again. You're not losing them. You're just being protected until you're ready.
A biological act of mercy. That is a beautiful thought. Thank you so much for walking us through this today.
My pleasure.
And thank you to everyone listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.